In an earlier episode, episode 8, I mentioned that I was going to later on start a series called Between Wars, Post-War, which was going to look at a number of books written in the first half of the 20th century in Europe that seemed to have a common theme. And I was going to read material from some of those books. I had done an introduction to that series, but I've now found that my circumstances don't allow me to upload more than about 15 minutes of content in one go, so I've had to get rid of the introduction and I'll just start straight on with one of the books. And instead of that introduction, we'll just have some comments from time to time and observations as we go through, looking at what we've been looking at. And I think that's probably better in a way, because it's better not to make any prejudicial conclusions right from the beginning. I think it's better to look at what the books are about and then talk about them. So we're starting on a book called The Fall, or La Chute in French, by Albert Camus, and maybe in French that should be Albert Camus, I'm not sure. It's quite a short book, but it's going to take a while to get through it all, only having the possibility of having short segments each week. So that's where we're going to start today. May I, monsieur, offer my services, without running the risk of intruding? I fear you may not be able to make yourself understood by the worthy gorilla who presides over the fate of this establishment. In fact, he speaks nothing but Dutch. Unless you authorise me to plead your case, he will not guess that you want gin. There, I dare hope he understood me. That nod must mean that he yields to my arguments. He's on the move. Indeed, he's making haste with a sort of careful deliberateness. You're lucky he didn't grunt. When he refuses to serve someone, he merely grunts. No one insists. Being master of one's moods is the privilege of the larger animals. Now I shall withdraw, monsieur, happy to have been of help to you. Oh, thank you. I'd accept if I was sure of not being a nuisance. Oh, you are too kind. Then I shall bring my glass over beside yours. You're right. His dumbness is deafening. It's the silence of primeval forest, heavy with menaces. At times I'm amazed by his obstinacy in snubbing civilised languages. His business consists in entertaining sailors of all nationalities in this Amsterdam bar, which he happens to have named, no one knows why, Mexico City. With such duties, wouldn't you think there might be some fear that his ignorance would be uncomfortable? Fancy the Cro-Magnon man lodged in the Tower of Babel. He would certainly feel out of his element. Yet this one is not aware of his exile. He goes his own sweet way. Nothing touches him. One of the rare sentences I have ever heard from his mouth proclaimed that you could take it or leave it. What did one have to take or leave? Doubtless our friend himself. I confess I'm drawn by such creatures who are all of a piece. Anyone who has meditated a good deal on man, by profession or vocation, is led to feel nostalgia for the primates. They at least don't have any ulterior motives. Our host, to tell the truth, does have some, although he harbours them deep within him. As a result of not understanding what is said in his presence, he has taken on a distrustful character, hence that look of touchy dignity, as if he suspected that all is not well with man. That disposition makes it less easy to discuss anything with him which doesn't concern his business. Notice, for instance, on the back wall above his head that empty rectangle, marking the place where a picture has been taken down. Indeed, there was a picture there, a particularly interesting one, a real masterpiece. Well, I was present when the master of the house received it, and also when it was taken down. In both cases he did so after weeks of rumination, with the same distrust. In that respect, society has somewhat spoiled, you must admit, the frank simplicity of his nature. Mind you, I'm not judging him. I consider his distrust justified and should be inclined to share it if, as you see, my communicative nature were not opposed to this. I am talkative, alas, and make friends easily. Although I know how to keep my distance, I seize any and every opportunity. When I used to live in France, were I to meet an intelligent man, I immediately sought his company. If that be foolish, I see you smile at the use of the subjunctive. I confess my weakness for that mood and for fine speech in general. A weakness that I criticise in myself, believe me. I am well aware that an addiction to silk underwear does not necessarily imply that one's feet are dirty. Nonetheless, style, like sheer silk, too often hides eczema. My consolation is to tell myself that, after all, those who murder the language are not pure either. Why, yes, let's have another gin. Are you staying long in Amsterdam? A beautiful city, isn't it? Fascinating. There's an adjective I haven't heard for some time. Not since leaving Paris, in fact, years ago. But the heart has its own memory, and I have forgotten nothing of our beautiful capital, nor of its quays. Paris is a real trompe-l'oeil, a magnificent dummy, inhabited by 4 million silhouettes. Nearly 5 million at the last census? Why, they must have multiplied. And that wouldn't surprise me. It always seemed to me that our fellow citizens had two passions, ideas and fornication, without rhyme or reason, so to speak. Still, let us take care not to condemn them. They are not the only ones, for all Europe is in the same boat. I sometimes think of what future historians will say of us. A single sentence will suffice for modern man. He fornicated and read the papers. After that vigorous definition, the subject will be, if I may say so, exhausted. Oh, not the Dutch. They are much less modern. They have time. Just look at them. What do they do? Well, those gentlemen over here live off the labours of those ladies over there. All of them, moreover, both male and female, are very middle-class creatures who have come here, as usual, out of mythomania or stupidity, through too much or too little imagination, in other words. From time to time, those gentlemen indulge in a little knife or revolver play, but don't get the idea that they're keen on it. Their role calls for it, that's all, and they're dying of fright as they shoot it out. Nevertheless, I find them more moral than the others, those who kill in the bosom of the family by a process of attrition. Haven't you noticed that our society is organised for this kind of liquidation? You have heard, of course, of those tiny fish in the rivers of Brazil that attack the unwary swimmer by thousands, and with swift little nibbles clean him up in a few minutes, leaving only an immaculate skeleton. Well, that's what their organisation is. Do you want a good clean life, like everybody else? You say yes, of course. How can one say no? OK, you'll be cleaned up. Here's a job, a family and organised leisure. And the little teeth attack the flesh right down to the bone. But I'm unjust. I shouldn't say their organisation. It is ours, after all. It's a question of which will clean up the other. Here's our gin at last. To your prosperity. Yes, the gorilla opened his mouth to call me doctor. In these countries, everyone is a doctor or a professor. They like showing respect, partly out of kindness, partly out of modesty. With these people, at least, spitefulness is not a national institution. Besides, I'm not a doctor. If you want to know, I was a lawyer before coming here. Now I am a judge penitent. But allow me to introduce myself. Jean-Baptiste Clemence, at your service. Pleased to know you. You are in business, no doubt? In a way. Excellent reply. Judicious too. In all things we are merely in a way. Now allow me to play the detective. You are my age, in a way, with the sophisticated eye of the man in his 40s who has seen everything, in a way. You are well dressed, in a way. That is, as people are in our country. And your hands are smooth, hence a bourgeois, in a way, but a cultured bourgeois. Smiling at the use of the subjunctive is, in fact, proves your culture twice over, because you recognise it to begin with, and then because you feel superior to it. Lastly, I amuse you. And be it said without vanity, this implies in you a certain open-mindedness. Consequently, you are, in a way, but no matter. Professions interest me less than sects. Allow me to ask you 2 questions, and don't answer if you consider them indiscreet. Do you have any possessions? Some. Good. Have you shared them with the poor? No. Then you are what I call a Sadducee. If you're not familiar with the scriptures, I admit that this won't help you, but it does help you. So you know the scriptures. Decidedly, you interest me. As for me, well, judge for yourself. By my stature, my shoulders, and this face that I have often been told was shy, I look rather like a football player, don't I? But if I'm judged by my conversation, it must be allowed I have a little subtlety. The camel that provided the hair for my overcoat may have been mangy. Instead, my nails are manicured. I too am sophisticated, and yet I confide in you without caution on the sole basis of your looks. Finally, despite my good manners and my fine speech, I frequent sailors' bars on the Zeedijk. Come on, give up. My profession is double, that's all, like the human being. I've already told you I am a judge penitent. Only one thing is simple in my case. I possess nothing. Yes, I was rich. No, I shared nothing with the poor. What does that prove? That I, too, was a Sadducee. Oh, do you hear the foghorns in the harbour? There'll be fog tonight on the Zuiderzee.